Sometimes we've got so much content we have to split it up between a couple of episodes. This is another one of those occasions. Now we're going to follow up with Benjamin Joffe to talk about how to build a strong startup ecosystem. And because the man is a genius, possibly, he's also going to share his thoughts on the startup system here in Malaysia.
Obviously, the US has a lot of angel investors on early stage capital because the tech space has been active for many decades now. So successful people reinvest in the sector. In other countries, it's a lot more difficult to have seed and early stage capital. One country that has done interesting initiatives is Singapore, because the government is very supportive of early stage investment. But they have a problem in the following stages, which is growth capital or venture capital, where there's not so many firms. Venture capital tends to be interested in companies that can at least provide you the hope of a 10 times return on your money. So if you invest in a company, you want to get 10 times this amount. So that means that the company you invest in has to be able to grow quite a bit. And if they're not targeting a big enough market, it's unlikely that they're going to grow that much. Another opportunity in the capital aspects of markets is to see what are the chances for a company to basically materialize the value they create. It can be done in two ways. One is going public on the stock market with an IPO. Second is to be acquired through an acquisition. This happens only in markets where you have big enough players to acquire companies and stock markets that are active enough. So that's a limitation for many, many smaller countries. English could sound like a controversial criteria because obviously if you're doing a local business, maybe you don't need English for most countries. But considering that most of the innovations are coming from Silicon Valley in terms of technology, and the working language is English, if you don't have access to the latest things, you're behind. So you're at a disadvantage. On top of that, if you're targeting not your local market, but a global market, English, not just as a communication, but also as a style of doing business, if you don't master that, it's going to be very difficult to address the biggest market on the planet, which is the US. So Singapore, in terms of culture, is at a disadvantage at the moment because there's not many role models, entrepreneurial role models. There's a very risk-averse culture in general, and I would say probably the price of real estate in Singapore has a role to play in that because people are just worried, right, about the future. How are they going to afford even housing? Those are some barriers. The fact that there's low risk-taking, limited number of role models is really damaging the next generation of entrepreneurs. All sorts of events, networks, co-working spaces, all things that actually bring people together. And those are really important because by meeting each other, that's where you can exchange ideas, exchange best practices, get to know people, and find the people you're going to build things with. So to give an example, I was building a project from Malaysia, and the people I built the project with are people that I got introduced to by friends of mine in Singapore. Then other people I got to work with are people I met through an event, a weekend event called Webcamp, then another event called Hack Weekend. So by meeting people in events, you get to know who they are, what they do, what people think about them, how skilled they are, and then you can combine those skills and do things. So I've been here for just a bit more than 6 months, on and off. I think Malaysia it's the very beginning of the ecosystem. So you don't have a lot of startups, you don't have a lot of investment, you have some government support, and you start to see some local initiatives. So I was talking with a friend of mine who's very active in the startup community, and he was saying that in Malaysia, there are more tech event organizers than there are startups. So it's a little bit fun to hear, but it's also great because that means that all those people joining those events, they talk to each other, they get stimulated, they're not yet ready to start something themselves, but when they are, they will know everyone they need. They will know exactly who to hire or who to work with. I think those initiatives are paving the way for future things. Also, in Malaysia, there's a number of startups that have got reasonable size. So you have Groupon, you have Zalora in the e-commerce space. So those are not really local startups because they are foreign initiatives, but they're training a lot of people. So anyone who worked at Zalora for, I don't know, 6 months will be probably really good at online marketing. And online marketing is very important for any online startup. So if you're going to start a business and you have an idea for something different, and you're looking for someone to help you with getting customers and getting users, well, you can go and talk to like current or former Zalora people. So it's really good to have this combination of initiatives from the grassroots to tech startups that are training people on getting the ecosystem to be tighter. There's different ways to look at it. So already, depending on how you call them, you show a point of view. Like copycat tend to have negative connotation. You could say local version, local adaptation. And this is something that is taking place in so many industries. Hollywood is taking scripts from all around the world, making remakes of movies, sometimes that perform better because the market is bigger. So I'd say getting inspiration from other markets and using best practices and successful concepts is not a new thing. In the tech space, there are like literal copycats that look identical but are a different company from whatever foreign company was there before. And there are also local versions. For example, I came across 2 companies that are doing taxi booking service. One is called Taxi Manga, the other one is called Taxi. And both of them are addressing a local problem with local solutions, combining best practices they've seen overseas with local issues. So they do, like one of them is doing a deal with a taxi company so that it makes it really easy for drivers and customers to book directly. And instead of getting the customer to pay, they get money from the taxi company. So it's a different approach, different business model. So I would say in most emerging markets or most new markets, there's a lot of gaps to fill and there's a lot of best practices to leverage. So it's normal to start this way. You can start innovating when you see that the concept you're using is not working perfectly, so you make adaptations, and adaptations are innovations. And later, when you have, I'd say, all the ground covered with the major services, then you can start to think, what is it that we need that will be different?